The calendar has flipped to August. The first open practice is in the books. It means the dawn of the Kevin Willard era is right around the corner. We take a look at what the ceiling and the floor looks like for the first year head coach with the Wildcats. Plus, Villanova has added a new name to its non-conference schedule, and it's a familiar foe. We look ahead at what to expect, and we take a look back at some of the nostalgia it brings to mind. All coming up next on Holy Nova. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Holy Nova. I'm Matt Janus alongside David White. We are part of the Big East Energy Network. David, it is the dog days of summer, but we're inching ever closer to the start of the season. August has finally arrived, which means we're still a long ways out, quite frankly, from getting this thing started, but it doesn't feel as far away, does it?
Not at all. I mean, it's the greatest month of the year, August. Everybody loves the Leo season, and got a birthday coming up. We got to get into football season, and then basketball is going to tip off.
You know, someday you're going to get old enough that you'll be less happy about these birthdays. It won't be nearly as fun.
Well, when I start losing my hair like you, I'll start saying that I don't have birthdays anymore.
Oh, wow, that hurts. Touche, though. I don't have much hair. I got to give you that. I can't really fight back on that one. Speaking of fighting back, the schedule just killed me this week. I was down at the Senior League Softball World Series working for ESPN. You work at North Carolina as a lawyer, so obviously you couldn't make the journey up north. Open practice, and we both missed it. That killed me. You know how much that killed me. A chance to go out and get a sneak peek at the team, but did speak to a couple people that were there. Obviously, read all the media accounts and the Twitter expert accounts as well, or X, whatever we're calling it these days. Let's put it this way. Most people were watching one person, and he didn't disappoint. It sounds like Acaden Lewis, very impressive during that open practice. His first real public appearance in a Villanova uniform, and kept hearing the words Jalen Brunson next to Acaden Lewis's name. It's a high praise, maybe a bit premature, but very high praise, very good sign. And it brings us to our next big question, David, as we start to move closer to the season. One of the things we're going to be talking about this week on the Big East Energy Network is kind of the ceilings and floors for the prospective teams in the conference in terms of what they can be in the Big East this year. So what better time than the present to talk about that with Villanova? You know, the Wildcats last year were middle of the pack, really the entire Kyle Neptune era. It felt like they were in the basement of the Big East because expectations are what they are for Villanova, and it just was an underachieving team. They were a middle of the pack team. This year, so many new pieces. We've talked about it many times. Almost no returning scoring, less than 10% of their offense back from a year ago, but a lot of intriguing pieces. When you look at this Villanova team and you look at this year's iteration of the Big East, in your mind, what is possible in terms of what's the best case scenario and what's the worst case scenario?
And this question gets harder and harder every year with the transfer portal causing roster turnover. You don't really know what you got back. You don't know what's in your bag. You don't know how a guy is going to transfer over. But I mean, I think if we're looking realistically at the Big East, you're looking at UConn and St. John's as 1 and 2 in some order. I guess you could say that probably four, I think, is best case scenario. Is you finish fourth, maybe you finish 16-4, you knock off one of UConn and St. John's somewhere. You get one of those games, you look pretty good. I mean, worst case scenario is it could get bad. It could be 8-9, somewhere around there. But I mean, I think realistically, probably somewhere around 6 is what you can expect from this iteration of the Nova team. We'll see what Kevin Willard's able to do. I mean, I know we're just talking about the Big East schedule right now, but the preseason or the non-conference schedule does set up nicely to get some wins. If the Big East is friendly and backloads the schedule, and you don't have to face St. John's or UConn until into late January, early February, and you get that team to gel, who knows? I mean, that's the fun part about this.
Or how about this? If you can get your home games on the back end, if you could play
Yeah.
UConn and St. John's at home back end, because I do agree with you. I think that this Villanova team with so many new pieces, if they gel right away, I think Kevin Willard's a good coach. If they gel right away and hit the ground running, he's Big East Coach of the Year. It's a no-brainer. But I do think this is going to be a work in progress, and they're going to have to get better and better as the year progresses. The question is, how much progress can they make during the non-conference portion of the season? The more people that you talk to, we keep alluding to all the bigs that he brought in, and he brought a high volume of bigs in, but they are still going to be a guard-oriented team. There looks like they're going to play as many as 12 guys right now in the rotation, which still seems like a high number to me. I know he wants to play faster. I know he wants to get up and down the floor. 12 still seems a little ambitious, but we'll see how that plays out. But if you're going to have 12 guys coming in and out, obviously you have the off season. That's what they're doing right now, trying to work together and find that synergy. But it's going to take some time. It's going to take some game reps. But that's what we're talking about here. That's the beauty of this conversation. You have 2 months of game reps to kind of get that figured out and then see where we are. Big East right now, it seems to me is pretty set in the tiers. There's a clear-cut 1-2. UConn and St. John's. I'll let them argue out who's 1, who's 2. And trust me, those fan bases are arguing about ad nauseum in the offseason. You've seen it all over the Big East.
Well, Rick Pitino and Dan Hurley might just fight at half court to see who finishes first or second.
I think they're trying to fight over who gets picked second. I think they both want to get picked second so they can have that chip on their shoulder, so to speak. But for sure, they are 1-2. Nobody, I think, at this point is really in much disagreement with that. Creighton lost a bunch, but Creighton has Coach Mack. And so I just at this point, I trust that man. I trust that program. I think they're clear-cut 3. If you're wrong, everybody has it down here. But at this point, they've earned the benefit of the doubt. They've earned the expectation that they're going to reload on the fly. You could argue the same thing about Shaka Smart. Certainly have had success in the regular season. I'm just so down on them right now after watching them lay another egg in March and the inconsistency down the stretch. That team seemed to be going the wrong way down the stretch last year, which I don't necessarily think points to great things when you're bringing back as many question marks as they are this year. So to me, for Marquette, it kind of starts that next tier, and then it's a muddled mess, 4 through 9. So to me, I put the ceiling, though, for Villanova. If everything broke right, I think they can finish third. I don't think they will, but I think they can finish third. I think that's absolutely realistic. We're not entirely sure what Creighton's going to be. And this Villanova team, if Acaden Lewis plays like a guy that has a decision to make at the end of the year, I still think he's a multiple year guy. But the more people that you talk to that watched him play in the high school ranks, that really pays attention to recruiting, that are the analysts that are trying to figure out the ceiling on these guys, they all think that he has it in him to take it to that next level. And you heard what everybody was kind of alluding to, the flashiness. Now, Kevin Willard had some really interesting things to say about Lewis after that open practice. He said the biggest X factor with Lewis is he's got to figure out when to play with flair and when to play within the offense, when to just make the regular pass, and when he can try to make that spectacular play, which gets you the feeling that he's making some mistakes and some turnovers behind closed doors in practice. And that's something that can cost him. But again, that's where that non-conference portion of the season, I think, is going to be critical, where he can kind of play through those mistakes, learn from them, and hopefully turn the proverbial corner come January. If he can do that, I think third is possible. Fourth is very realistic. But in terms of floor, look, I think no disrespect to Kevin Willard's former team and to our friends over at Pirate Vibes. Brian makes all our graphics. He is our social media guru. He is very helpful to this Holy Nova show, and he lives and dies with Seton Hall basketball. I love PJ Carlissimo as a kid, so I am partial to Seton Hall as well. they just look bad. They just don't look like a good basketball team. I think everybody has them written in ink in that 11 spot. And then for the first time in a long time, most people don't have DePaul in the bottom two. I think a lot of people think DePaul has a chance to be a little better. I think DePaul has a chance to be considerably better than they were in years past. So the point remains, I think that the 10 spot, a lot of people have Xavier there. I don't think Villanova is going to finish bottom two. I think 9, though, if everything went wrong, if this team does not, if the pieces never quite click, like right now, he's trying to put them together, and you can see, kind of read between the lines of some of the things he's saying, that work in progress, still things that we have to work on. There are steps forward that we can take. If those steps don't end up coming to fruition, yeah, it could be a rough year. And I don't think that's the end of the world, because, again, he's kind of put in place a team where he's built some through recruiting with some younger guys that are projects that he's hoping to get a lot more out of in year 2 and year 3. And he's brought some multi-year transfers in. You don't want to come in 9th, but I'm not going to be jumping off of buildings if they do come in 9th this year. I think I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and wait another year. But to me, that's the ceiling, or the floor. 9 is the floor. 3 is the ceiling. And realistically, they're going to probably come somewhere between 4th and 6th.
Yeah. And I mean, I kind of like what Kevin Willard was saying after the open practice, some of that coach speak, where it could be true. It could be he feels really good about his team. He doesn't want his players getting a big head. He wants to put something out so that they see, hey, we still have stuff to work on. So we'll see. But it's an exciting time to finally get into practice and start working as a team, learning how Willard works on the sideline, all of those things, working with the individual skill position coaches. That all of this time is so important to getting ready for the season.
And kudos, by the way, to Villanova, to the athletic department, and the way they're trying to put this in place. Now, granted, they kind of have to. You have to be a little bit more fan-friendly these days, because the fans are paying for everything, particularly the ones with money. They're the ones. I mean, they've always bankrolled the athletics program, but now they are bankrolling the payroll for the basketball team. And, the Big East isn't going to be able to generate the $20 million in television revenue. So you're going to have to do that through donors. And the way you do that is by giving out access. But give them credit that they give it access to the public. It wasn't just, big time money donors that got to go to the open practice. I thought that was a good thing. They've also done a great job this year on social media. Kevin Willard mic'd up a couple different times behind the scenes at practice, get to know the transfers. These are things that we've seen in bits and pieces from Villanova in the past, but we are seeing in much greater volume this year. And I feel like when you're trying to reconnect with a fan base that was pretty frustrated, and quite frankly, it's tough. You go from living the dream of the Jay Wright era, where everything is just wonderful, to he retires out of the blue, they fall off, and now nothing goes right under Kyle Neptune. You missed the tournament 3 straight years. You go from the highest to highest to the lowest to lows. Most people haven't checked out, but it is hard to get as excited, and it is it's just a constant gut punch of, man, this used to be amazing. And hopefully they get back there, but you do feel a fan base that is trying to find that enthusiasm again. And I think the athletic department's trying to meet them halfway and trying to give them more access, something to gravitate towards, something to grab onto. And you know what? I really like what they have done in this offseason. I think it's very helpful to this fan base.
Yeah, no, I agree. Access always leads to people being happy. It leads to, the expectation game going crazy. But I think that for a fan base that, expects to be at that highest of highs, because it's only been what I went
They were
to
in
law
the
school.
finals
I didn't go to math school.
3.5 years ago, they were in the Final Four. I know it seems like a lot longer than that, but it really wasn't.
Mm-hmm. So you got to give them something, and hopefully that this open practice with Coach Willard and his his energy around the program will lead to some excitement coming into the season.
Well, speaking of giving them something, we were talking about the non-conference schedule a few weeks ago, and one of the things that we did kind of point to, that Kevin Willard was pretty open about it. He wants to build more home and homes, and he wants to build a more prominent non-conference schedule. And I think that's kind of a necessity in the age of super conferences. The
Yeah,
Big East
sure.
is a power conference, but the SEC and the Big Ten have turned into something different. And then you add to it the Big 12, which has so many basketball-centric schools. Now, all of a sudden, it does feel like the Big East has kind of slid into that number 4 slot alongside the ACC. Big East has a little bit more depth. The ACC had a little bit more top tier. We'll see whether UConn, Duke, how that ends up working out long term. But
Mm-hmm.
the point remains, they're in that 4-5 slot. So you're going to have to play some non-conference games if you want to get depth into the NCAA tournament. That's true for the Big East. That's true for the ACC. Somehow it seems like the only conference that doesn't have to do that is the old Mountain West, which finally got splintered. So hopefully that problem takes care of itself.
Don't get me started on this. You already know how much I hate the SEC, Big 10, Big 12 when you have the ACC and Big East slotted 4 and 5, whatever order, when those two conferences have done the best in March of anybody, even with less seeds. Wins above seed projection, the ACC and the Big East are lapping every other conference. But I understand.
Now I will. As much as it does pain me to admit this, it was a rough, bleak March for the Big East this past season. This was the
Yeah.
first time they did truly underachieve. They didn't have that bellwether program, be it Villanova or UConn, that they've always had. UConn had the down year. You were counting on St. John's, laid that egg in the second round against Arkansas. Pitino getting outcoached by Cal, just didn't see that one coming in a million years, if we're being blatantly honest. The panic move with benching your best player and a sort, it was a rough March. But overall, I completely agree with you, big picture. But on the non-conference front, you still look at this point, the committee has spoken. The good news is that the NCAA announced today that they're not going to go beyond 68 teams this year. Sounds like they're going to wait a year and go beyond 68 teams, which isn't ideal. But at least for now, they're not going to make the disastrous decision to make the regular season even more meaningless. But because you do have to earn your way into the tournament, he wants to play a good, solid non-conference slate. The problem for Villanova was because they were locked into an MTE with 3 games against not all that entertaining opponents at home. They were short on dates, and they had to set these games up. So they had set up their 2 big non-conference games against Big Ten teams, Michigan and Wisconsin, on the road this year. BYU is at a neutral site in Las Vegas, which is, very quick commute from Provo, Utah, much more
I don't know if the
manageable.
Mormons are allowed in Vegas, though. So
I think they used to go every year for the Mountain West Conference tournament. So I think they're familiar with how to not get in trouble in Vegas. They probably could give us all lessons for how to do Vegas. But they needed a home game was the point of the matter. And finally, they announced the marquee home game. It's not exactly, the stuff of top 10 opponents, but it is a name that it brings back some memories to Villanova fans. Pitt is on the schedule. They will play Pitt this year at home, Pitt next year on the road. Obviously, the former Big East rival, 33-32, the all-time series between the two schools. So a pretty close all-time matchup. And then obviously Kevin Willard went to school at Pitt. I mean, his dad used to be the head coach there, Ralph. And so after he started at Western Kentucky, he finished up his last couple of years at Pitt. So I think that mattered to him as well, to get a chance to renew a rivalry, play an ACC school, and face off against his alma mater. Seems like it's all gravy for Kevin Willard and Noel.
Yeah, and I think it's a great move. I mean, like you said, you bring back an old school Big East rivalry, so you get fans excited about a home game. You playing a power conference team in a home and home. Pitt has looked improved every year that Jeff Capel's been there, so I'm not saying I don't think it's probably a quad 1 win when all's said and done, but it probably ends up being quad 2, which I mean if that's the worst thing you can say about a game is it was a quad 2 game, then there are worse things in life.
Well, and to what we just talked about, as Villanova gels together, it feels like the kind of game you can win early in the
Yeah,
year as you're gelling together. You might lose it, but Pitt's got a lot of new pieces as well. I mean, it brought in 7 newcomers, so they're kind of in a similar spot as Villanova. It's a familiar head coach. They're not starting the program all over, but so many new pieces in. They've been ravaged. They just don't have the NIL that some of the other schools have, and the ACC is not a natural fit.
no.
Nobody at Villanova is going to cry any tears for Pitt, considering they, alongside Syracuse, put the final death nail in the original Big East and tried to kill off the conference. But you do look at what was and what has become. And if you're a Villanova fan, you do also kind of look in the mirror and be like, man, that could have been us. Like it is like a cold slap in the face of, whoo, glad you're on the other side of it. It didn't go the other way.
Yeah, I mean, like realignment is killing everybody. Realignment sucks. It's the worst thing that we've done to the sport of basketball. I mean, it's great for football. Everybody who's out there for football, all these super conferences work for football. They don't work for basketball. I mean, Pitt has had to reshape themselves. Fans aren't. This isn't the old school Jamie Dixon Pitt. This isn't. We're gonna grind it out. We're gonna play bully basketball. This is an ACC Pitt, which is a more finesse game. Which, just quite frankly, the city of Pittsburgh is not exactly the place where you're like, oh, these guys like to play a finesse game of basketball. The city of Pittsburgh is a little gruff. It's a little tough. And I think, like you said, they just fit more naturally into that typical Big East mold, whereas they don't into the ACC. But like I said, I mean, Jeff Capel, obviously he's an ACC guy, played at Duke. He knows the ACC, and he's continued to get them better. They've never gotten over that proverbial hump, but they're a good team. They're not great. They're a solid team. So a win there is a good win.
They got
if
to the
you
second,
can get it.
got to the second round of the tournament a couple years ago. Half step back this year. And then again, in the age of the portal, you're just not quite sure what to expect. A lot of new pieces, a lot of moving parts. We'll have to wait and see what they are this year. But you feel like, he kind of has found his footing. There was a guy that was on the proverbial rise in the coaching industry. We all played the game. Who's going to end up following K? Nobody had John Shire, but we all played that game so many times over the years. And for a long time, Capel was one of those names that everybody kind of agreed. If Johnny Dawkins was answer 1A and Capel was 1B, and then Oklahoma fell apart on him. And he kind of had to remake himself, went back to K's staff. And now it feels like he's kind of found a place at Pitt, and he is building that program despite all the challenges that it faces in his own image, that guard-centric, tough, blue-collar. And you want Pitt to be good, because I'll say this much. If you ever been to a game at the at Peterson Event Center, that place that's a fun place to watch a college basketball game. When the atmosphere is going, that was one of those new builds in the early odds. They did that place right. You thought when they replaced Fitzgerald, why would you get rid of that place? It was grimy. It was everything college basketball was supposed to be. And this thing looks so sterile. It looks so concrete. And then you go inside, and the Oakland Zoo is a thing, man. That energy in the Ben Howland era and then the Jamie Dixon era, that was as good as anything in the Big East.
Yeah, no, as a fan of North Carolina who's fallen victim to the Oakland Zoo, I know how rowdy it can get in there, and it can really disrupt a team. So yeah, I agree that it's a great place to watch a basketball game, especially if Pitt's doing well.
So you look at a renewal of an old school Big East rivalry, and it got us thinking, what are the old Big East rivalries that don't exist anymore? So many of the new ones have become fun rivalries for Villanova, and maybe that's a show that we do in the future, the best new rivalry inside the conference. But as we talk about Pitt, you got to talk about the nostalgia of the old Big East and the behemoth, the oversized behemoth that it became. Obviously, the heyday in the
Yeah.
80s was when it was at its best. But then there were more teams that got added in the 90s. It got as big as 16 at one point, and it was the first mega conference, quite frankly. It outgrew how big a conference should be, as they were trying to chase football dollars and mold it with what they had built in basketball. But when you look at the teams that have departed, I mean, obviously one school above all else, I think the Villanova fans would like to play most. But what stands out to you of who's missed most on that schedule?
I mean, it has to be Syracuse, right? When Jim Boeheim had it rolling, everybody wanted to play Syracuse. You wanted to beat Syracuse.
You wanted to make Boeheim whine.
Yeah.
That's what you wanted to do.
Oh, yeah. It's incredibly fun to watch when he's pissed off and whining. But what about you? What would you say?
I mean, Syracuse is the answer. Although, quite frankly, with Boeheim gone, I don't know what it is. Syracuse might have been Boeheim.
But I mean,
maybe they'll get back.
I feel like that's every place. We have coaches leaving left and right, and you're like, what is this now?
Okay, but your alma mater, North Carolina, Dean leaves, and Guthridge takes over. Granted, they had the couple-year window with Matt Doherty, but then after that, they bring in Roy. Roy leaves. Huber's been up and down, but North Carolina still matters. Duke, Shire takes over for Kay. Duke still matters. We'll see about Villanova when Jay Wright leaves. Obviously, that one is still out the window. But UConn, another prime example. No one thought UConn would ever get back to the heights that they were under with Jim Calhoun. And then Hurley comes and, wow, they're just as good. If not, quite frankly, that might have been their best team ever that we saw a couple years ago. So it should be about more than one person, but I think more than anyone else, and again, we'll wait and see how the Kevin Willard era goes at Villanova, because this might end up sounding like hollow words coming from a Villanova fan in a couple years. But assuming that the past history of Villanova, where from coach to coach they've won no matter what, and the Count Neptune era is the exception to the rule rather than the norm. But Jim Boeheim built that place. It's the middle of nowhere in New York. I mean, we all just learned that their building was named after an air conditioning company. I just assumed that was a donor. I didn't even know they used air conditioning in upstate New York, frankly. But, it is Jim Boeheim, and so Syracuse doesn't feel the same without him there. Maybe it's just my age and that I grew up with him, and that there was kind of a love-hate to Syracuse, because I couldn't play man-to-man defense in my mediocre high school career either. So I really appreciated watching the 2-3 zone. I didn't have the hops that any of their guys had to play the 2-3 zone, but I really appreciated watching them play it. And I also always appreciated the fact that you got to play against them, because you just knock down jump shots all day long against Syracuse. If they were going in, it was a beautiful thing.
So, no, I think that you're totally right on programs. I was just speaking more about rivalries. I mean,
you're right.
Like, Carolina Duke is still a rivalry, but it's not Dean Smith and Coach K. It's not even Roy Williams and Coach K. It's John Shire and Hubert Davis. As much as Duke is disliked, John Shire on the hatred graph doesn't come anywhere near Mike Krzyzewski. So
I think the world agrees with that. Although he's trying. Give him a
he's trying his best.
Yeah.
When he ran to save Cooper Flagg from that grad student at Wake Forest, we all hated him a little bit.
But on the Big East front, I mean, Pitt would be the answer to me. I second to Syracuse. Syracuse is a clear one. And then Pitt is 2. There were some good games with Pitt. We're going to come back to that in a second. And then of the newer Big East teams that came in, that second wave, one other old school Big East rivalry that's not there anymore. There were some fun games with Boston College back in the day. Gary Williams in the mid-'80s before he went to his alma mater at Maryland. And then Jim O'Brien built it up. Granted, he put him on probation, but Jim O'Brien built it up. And then Al Skinner had some good teams. They played a Sweet
People
16.
forget how good Al Skinner was at BC. Like, I think people sleep on what Al Skinner was able to accomplish at Pitt.
It was a weird phenomenon because Al Skinner was a great program builder, and then he would do things inside the game. He would just do things where you just really scratch. My bald spot would have been a lot more profound if I was a Boston College fan back then. He just do things where you'd be like, I don't understand what you're looking to accomplish here. And I think that's maybe why it's kind of that Calipari syndrome where people appreciate what he does as a program builder, but his game coaching every once in a while just makes you, what are we doing here, Cal? I mean, you know more than me, but this seems like a weird thing that we're going out here. And that was Al Skinner. But you're right. I mean, heck, they were a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, I think 3 times during his tenure there, and he had a lot of success.
Yeah. But what do you remember about the Pitt Nova rivalry?
All right, so I went back and was racking my brain on this one. One answer obviously is the answer. It's the only answer. Scotty Rounds going coast to coast and taking you to the Final Four. That was one to remember. It was Jay Wright's first Final Four. It was a Final Four in as dramatic a way as you could possibly punch a ticket to the Final Four. So that will forever be one. Also added extra credit for the fact that was Pitt's best team with DeJuan Blair. I mean, that was their one. Remember all those Pitt teams that knocked on the door, that they were Temple 2.0. They were the Elite 8 darlings that could never quite get over that hump and find their way to the Final Four.
DeJuan Blair was an anomaly. I don't know. I still don't understand how DeJuan Blair was as good as he was.
Poor man's Charles Barkley, but very similar games. Low to the ground, but wide, and understood how to box out and was willing to box out. He was, he was tough to deal with. And then that same year, by the way, regular season, they played the last game in the college game in the history of the Spectrum, the old Spectrum. And that was a big win for Villanova because that team, they had lost a couple of close games. They had a team meeting actually down in South Florida because they weren't playing all that well. Confidence was shaken. And they needed a game like that. They needed a resume win like that to get the kind of seed they were looking for. And they got it. It was a 10-point win over then top 4 Pitt team. And to be able to get that to close out the Spectrum, which was a historic building, all the famous college basketball games, the Leitner game against Kentucky, Bobby Knight winning a national championship, a lot of big-time games. And then, of course, Villanova, all the Kerry Kittles memories, Ed Pinckney, all the games against Georgetown and Syracuse over the years that they played at that Spectrum. That was a big deal to get that one. And then 2 other below-the-radar games that people might ring a bell when you say it, but that you wouldn't have thought of in a long, long time. One was a bad Villanova team, but it was one of the most entertaining games of my childhood. Like a 1997 Big East tournament. Maybe 98 actually. Yeah, it was the first team that Villanova didn't make the tournament in 4 or 5 years since Lapis had gotten it going. Kittles had already graduated 2 years earlier, and then the Alvin Williams, Jason Lawson class graduated and moved on, and they were bad. They were like 13 and 17, and they were going nowhere. So it was as soon as you lose, the season's over. Pitt was pretty good. They were on the come up, and Howard Brown had the game of his life. I mean, he just made shot after shot. He tied the game, and then he won it with a buzzer beater in double overtime. And it was just, the Garden went nuts. And it was one of those special nights at the Garden where game meant absolutely nothing. Villanova lost the next night, but it was a memory, and it was one of those only at the Garden type situations that was fun. And then the last
one.
For
you kids out there, 1998 was a time before computers and stuff. It was when we thought computers were going to kill us eventually.
Yeah, we were all still worried about the upcoming Y2K fiasco. And you didn't stream the games. You couldn't even watch them on national TV. They were on they were syndicated onto your local cable channel that you would then try to figure out.
Cable is a TV service. You had to have a line run into your house.
Yeah, you had to win 2 games just to get on national TV. Even in this, where the Big East was a really big deal, you would get on ESPN, and then I think that was still the days where the last 2 rounds might have been the first year ESPN had it, but it might have been the last 2 rounds were on CBS. It was much different times, let's put it that way. And then the last one, couple of years earlier, this is the Kerry Kittle days. This is a really good Villanova team that went up to Fitzgerald. There was some guy named Kevin Willard, who was the coach's kid, who was just annoying, who was on the Pitt team. Didn't play a ton, but he was on that team, and Pitt jumped all over Villanova. Villanova kind of sleptwalked through the game. They were down by 13. It looked like they were done. They were in massive foul trouble. And the Kerry Kittles just took over. They get 20 points, something like that, in the final 12 minutes to get the game to overtime. Ended up going to double overtime, and Villanova wins that game. And that was a Villanova team that would go on to win a Big East championship. So I was a big deal Villanova team, and that was a good win. And it was at a time when they were fighting for, you thought, a 1 or a 2 line. They would end up being a 3 seed. They would not get out of the first weekend, as was the want of the Steve Lapis era. But it was one of those games where you're like, man, Kerry Kittles is for real good. Like, that was the kind of game he would play that would make you understand why Calipari, even though he claims he had nothing to do with this, drafted Kerry Kittles over Kobe Bryant. That it was games like that is why that happened.
No, I ain't that. Yeah. This is why you want those old school rivalries back. Northeast Conference, you want, like, it hurts my soul looking at the landscape of conferences. And I mean, I'm so excited about that UCLA Rutgers game that I can't wait. Can't wait for it.
I doubt you're more excited about than Mick Cronin. He seems to be the least excited human being. He went on a pity party for about 3 weeks about it last year. But the good news is that at least the new Big East, I don't even know if you can call it new at this point, but the current iteration of the Big East, what it became, boy, it when it fell apart, when it splintered, and the Catholic schools got together and they said, no more following around the football schools. We're not going to do this anymore. Nobody knew what to expect. And obviously Villanova was a big part of making it work. If not for Jay Wright turning Nova into a national power, the Big East probably faces a lot more questions than it did. Who knows if the conference is in the kind of position that it would be to lift UConn back into a national power when it rejoined a few years ago. So Villanova had a big part of it, but boy, it could have been, again, if you had said when the Big East was breaking up that Nova was going to be in a better conference position than Pitt and Syracuse in the year 2025, 99% of the world would have said, you are out of your mind. There's no way that's going to be the case. But between the fact that neither program can win in the ACC and the fact that the ACC has a expiration date and a clock just counting down towards its execution here in what now we've set the death date for 2031 when the buyout goes away. It's just amazing. Whereas the Big East has to worry about whether UConn gets a wandering eye, and that would hurt the conference, but it wouldn't kill the conference. It would still be a very entertaining TV product.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, Nova and the other Big East teams did what needed to be done. Syracuse, Pitt, they haven't done what they were supposed to do coming into the ACC. I mean, the Big East surviving and thriving with Xavier, Creighton, Butler. I mean, you had what Butler did under Brad Stevens before they came into the Big East, which really gave them a nice wave into the Big East. They did what needed to be done, and they won.
And who knows where the Big East would be if Brad Stevens hadn't gotten sick of recruiting and would have stayed at Butler. Because obviously mean, if you can go to the national championship game out of the Horizon League, who
Yeah.
knows what you could have done with a little bit of resources at Butler. That's kind of scary to think about. Now, granted, he'd be the Indiana coach by now, but it would have been a dangerous
Indiana
few-year run.
Indiana fans need to hate the fact that Victor Oladipo and Cody Zeller went to Indiana, because Brad Stevens would have been the head coach at Indiana had that not happened.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And it is Creighton. To me, the story of the new Big East is Creighton. That's why it was so criminal when they got hosed by the officials a few years ago in that Elite Eight game against San Diego State. That was that they should have been. They have been a program that is worthy of making a Final Four between
such a bad call.
McDermott, Raggy, all the guys that they have had over the years, and then this last iteration of that team, the last 3 years that they put out there. At some point, they should have gotten to a Final Four. They're not the world's best defensive program. They stopped playing defense for extended stretches from time to time, but you won't find a program that has more big wins than Creighton does over the years. They were a thorn in Jay Wright's side. They've been a thorn in Danny Hurley's side, and they should have went to that Final Four. The officials took that Final Four trip away from them a few years ago.
They did, but I have a bone to pick with Creighton, so I have no problem with it. From the 2012 tournament where, Doug McDermott broke Kendall Marshall's wrist and really derailed my Tar Heels from playing Kentucky in the national championship game. So,
hey, Dougie Buckets played hard. Dougie Buckets played the game hard, whatever it takes, man. Villanova fans can tell you about that. He ruined quite a few nights in the Wells Fargo Center over the years, just standing at that corner, knocking down 3 after 3. Him and Ethan Raggi still haven't missed from that one game. All right, good show. We gotta move this summer along. I don't know about you. I'm jonesing for some basketball. We're talking a lot of basketball right now. We're going to keep talking about what this team looks like. It's good to finally get the opportunity to have them get out there in front of the public. Wish it would have been when I wasn't working and in town, but very excited to see them do that. And the good news is, school's starting back up next month, and as you know better than anybody, once you get the kids back on campus, then things really ramp up, and the news will start to come out, and we'll get more and more information about what this team's going to actually look like.
And we'll get some of those scrimmages that are not so private anymore, and some real intel on how they look playing against somebody else.
That was one last. That's a great call by you, David. Last piece of news before we go got announced today. We're filming this on Monday, August the 4th. It got announced that they will play an exhibition, because you got to make money in everything in college athletics. So they're not going to do the closed door scrimmages anymore. They're going to play a flat out exhibition against Virginia, and that'll be interesting because a lot of people, once the speculation came that Kyle Neptune was going to get hired, everybody kind of assumed it was going to be Oden or it was going to be Willard. And he chose UVA. He thought that was a better path for him from VCU. And Villanova was very happy to end up with Kevin Willard. So we'll kind of get to see where both of those guys are right before their first season at their new schools begins.
I mean, it's a great place to look and see what we're going to see from both of them. I mean, you're talking about 2 completely new systems at 2 schools that have had a lot of success in the past. So that should be a fun one to watch.
So that's coming up in the last week of October, but unfortunately, we still have a couple months until then. We'll be back soon on Holy Nova. For David White, I'm Matt Janus. We're part of the Big East Energy Network. Thanks so much for being with us.